The last signal, the desert world of Trelvac was dying. Once it had been a thriving colony of the Vayari people. Green fields stretched across the valleys, starships filled the skies, and laughter echoed in the crystal cities. But now, only ruins remained. The atmosphere burned with toxic storms. The fields had turned to ash. Families huddled in crumbling shelters, their eyes hollow with fear and hunger. Every empire had abandoned them. The Galactic Council had promised aid, but years passed and no ships ever came. The Vayari sent message after message into the void of space, distress calls, coordinates, desperate pleas. Silence was always the answer. Now, in a small bunker beneath the wreckage of their capital tower, one last transmitter hummed weakly. The machine was old, patched together with scraps of wire and melted steel. Its blue light flickered like a dying candle. A single Vayari engineer named Kalor leaned over the console. His hands trembled, not from age but from hopelessness. Around him, the last survivors waited in silence. Children clung to their mothers. Warriors too weak to stand leaned on broken rifles. "This is the last signal," Kalor whispered, his voice cracked. "If no one answers this time, we are finished." He pressed the switch. The transmitter groaned and a hollow voice echoed into the stars. "To any who can hear us, this is Trelvac. We are dying. We have no food, no air, no medicine. We beg for rescue. Please, if there is mercy in the galaxy, answer." The bunker fell silent. The survivors lowered their heads. They had spoken these words countless times before, and no one had ever come. Above the ruined world, the message shot into the cold void of space. It traveled across broken satellites, dead war zones, and forgotten trade routes. Empires heard it, powerful fleets recorded it, and once again they turned away. Why waste ships on a dying people? But then, far beyond the edge of known space, the message reached a world most of the galaxy ignored. Earth. On the bridge of a human exploration vessel, Commander Elias Ward leaned forward as the signal crackled through his speakers. His crew turned their heads, listening to the faint, desperate words. "Sir," his officer whispered, "that planet is deep in Council territory. No one else has responded." Elias narrowed his eyes, so the galaxy ignored them again. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the human ship. Then Elias stood. "Prepare the jump drive. Set course for Trelvac." His officer hesitated. "But Commander, they are not our people. This is not our war." Elias turned, his voice firm. "A cry for help is never someone else's war." Back on Trelvac, hours passed in silence. The survivors stared at the radio, waiting, hoping, doubting. Children cried themselves to sleep. Kalor leaned against the wall, whispering, "It is over. No one will come." But then, the transmitter sparked. A sound filled the bunker, strange and sharp, unlike the voices of the empires. A message, clear and steady. "This is the human vessel Resolute. We heard your call. Hold on. We are coming." Gasps filled the room. Some laughed, some wept. Kalor dropped to his knees, covering his face with trembling hands. For the first time in years, there was an answer. Outside, the toxic winds screamed across the ruins. But deep inside the bunker, hope flickered like fire. They did not know who these humans truly were. Many had never even seen one. The galaxy spoke of them as a small, fragile species, always struggling against stronger empires. Surely, they could not offer much. And yet, when every empire had stayed silent, it was humanity who had answered. Kalor looked at the glowing transmitter. His voice was soft, but carried to all. "They heard us. The humans are coming." In the distance, the storms roared like beasts across the dead land. The survivors held each other tighter, fear mixing with new hope. The stars had ignored them, The council had abandoned them, but somewhere beyond the void, engines burned with human fire, closing in, and Trelvak's last signal would not be its last breath. Arrival of the unseen. The sky above Trelvak was broken. Dark clouds twisted like claws, lightning split the horizon, and the toxic storms never rested. For years the survivors had watched the sky with fear. No ships came, no banners of rescue lit the clouds, only ash, only silence. But now, the watchers on the crumbling tower saw something new. A streak of silver burned through the black clouds. At first they thought it was another meteor, another piece of death falling from the sky. Then the shape slowed, lights flickered, engines roared like thunder. A ship. Gasps spread through the ruins. Survivors stumbled outside their bunkers, shielding, their eyes from the toxic wind staring upward in disbelief. "It is true," whispered a young Vayari boy. They answered. The vessel descended slowly, its hull scarred but steady, wings cutting through the storm. Unlike the towering warships of the empires, this ship was smaller, sleek, sharp, and built for survival, not glory. Its name, burned, into the side glowed faintly through the ash. Resolute. The ship landed on the broken plains outside the capital ruins. Dust and storm winds exploded outward. The survivors gathered at a distance, eyes wide, hearts pounding. They had expected massive fleets, golden banners, armies marching. Instead, one ship. Just one. "They mock us again," an elder hissed. "One fragile vessel cannot save a dying world." But Kalor, the engineer, shook his head. "No, they came when no one else did. That is no mockery." The landing ramp groaned. A figure stepped out. He wore no golden crown, no flowing cape. His armor was scratched, his rifle simple, his steps heavy with weight. A human. The Vayari stared. They had heard stories. Humans were small, fragile, not suited for war or storms. Yet the man who walked down the ramp looked steady, his eyes sharp like steel. Behind him followed a handful of crew, men and women, each carrying crates, tools, and medical packs. The human commander raised his voice against the storm. "We heard your cry. We came to help." For a moment, silence. The wind howled. The Vayari stared at each other. Finally, one shouted bitterly, "Where is your fleet? Where are your armies? Do you think one ship can save us when the galaxy has abandoned us?" The commander did not flinch. His voice was calm. "You do not need fleets. You need people who will not give up." Kalor stepped forward, pushing through the crowd. His eyes locked with the humans. "Why? Why would you come? The great empires turned away. What makes humanity different?" The commander's answer was simple. "Because you asked for help." His crew moved quickly. They unloaded supplies, handed out food packets, checked the wounded with scanners, and set up strange machines that hummed against the wind. They worked with precision, no fear in their eyes, no hesitation. The Vayari watched in disbelief. These humans had no banners, no promises, no glory speeches. They simply worked. By nightfall, a small dome of strange human alloy stood near the ruins. It glowed faint blue, shielding the air inside. Families were brought in, coughing children laid on beds, warriors given clean water. Still, whispers spread among the survivors. "This cannot last. The storm will crush their little dome." They do not understand Trelvak's fury. Kalor sat near the edge of the new shelter, watching the humans work late into the night. The commander moved among his crew, giving quiet orders, lifting beams with his own hands. There was no arrogance in him, only determination. Finally, Kalor asked, "Do you truly believe you can stand against our storms?" The commander looked out at the raging horizon, lightning tearing across the sky. His face was calm, almost grim. "We do not believe," he said. "We know." As if to challenge his words, a deep rumble shook the ground. The storm on the horizon thickened, growing darker, angrier. Sparks of red lightning carved across the desert. It was stronger than any storm the Vayari had seen in years. The survivors cried out in fear. Some ran back to their broken shelters. Others fell to their knees. "It comes early," Kalor whispered. "This storm. It will destroy everything." The human commander turned to his crew. His voice was hard as iron. "Seal the dome. Hold the line." The survivors stared at the glowing human shelter, thin and fragile against the monster storm. Rolling closer, and as the first wave of thunder slammed against the plains, the Vayari could not stop thinking one thought. If the humans fail, it is the end. The impossible shelter. The storm came like a monster. Winds screamed across the plains sharp as knives. Lightning ripped through the sky in red and white arcs. The ground trembled with every strike. The survivors of Trelvac huddled together inside. The shelters they had built long ago, stone walls, metal sheets, broken towers patched with rust. They prayed to whatever god still listened, but deep inside they knew. Their shelters had failed before, and they would fail again. Only one structure stood apart from the ruins, the new human dome. Its faint blue glow shimmered in the darkness, small and fragile compared to the raging storm. The Vayari scoffed. "That thing will not last a single blast. It is too thin, too weak." They do not know this world. Kalor, however, could not take his eyes off it. He had studied shelters all his life. He knew the strength of metal, the weakness of stone. But this dome, this was different. The walls were thin, yes, but there was something alive about them. The energy that flowed across its surface shifted like waves of water, bending with the wind instead of breaking against it. Inside the dome, the humans worked quickly. Commander Elias Ward stood at the center, watching as his crew secured the supports. Tools whirred, lights flashed, and screens flickered with streams of data. "Energy field stable," one officer called out. "Reinforcement beams holding," another confirmed. Elias nodded. "Good. We hold until morning." Outside, the storm struck. The first blast of wind slammed into the human dome like a hammer. The survivors gasped as stones ripped from the ground and smashed against the glowing walls. Sparks flew. The dome bent inward, then bounced back. It did not break. The storm grew angrier. Red lightning lashed down, striking the top of the dome. The energy rippled, shaking the ground. But again, the dome absorbed the blow, the light flowing across its surface like water carrying fire away. The Vayari who had mocked now stood frozen. Their own shelters cracked, roofs tore away, walls split open. Screams echoed as families ran into the storm, desperate for safety. And still, the human dome stood. Kalor's voice trembled. It should not be possible. The survivors fled, their collapsing shelters rushing toward the glowing dome. The humans opened the gates, pulling them inside, dragging children out of the storm. The dome filled with frightened Vayari, coughing, bleeding, clutching one another. One alien elder, once full of pride, fell to his knees before Elias. "Your shelter, it holds when ours fail. How can this be?" Elias looked down at him, his voice steady. "Because we do not build to look strong. We build to survive." Hours passed. The storm raged. Outside, towers crumbled into dust. Rivers of ash carved across the desert. Inside, the human dome stood firm, humming with quiet power. The Vayari watched as humans moved calmly through the chaos. They repaired the shield when cracks appeared. They shared food and water with strangers. They comforted the terrified children. Not one of them gave in to fear. Kalor realized something then. The humans were not stronger than other species. Their ship was not larger, their weapons not brighter. But their spirit was different. Where others turned away, humanity had stepped forward. Where others would have surrendered, humans fought to hold the line. As dawn broke, the storm began to fade. The red lightning grew weaker, the winds softened, and the desert fell quiet again. When the survivors stepped outside, they saw the truth. Every Vayari shelter had collapsed into ruins. Homes were gone, towers were nothing but piles of stone. But the human dome still stood, glowing against the rising sun. The survivors fell silent. For the first time in years, their eyes filled not with despair, but with awe. Commander Elias Ward stepped outside, his armor dusted with ash, his face hard but calm. He looked at the horizon where the storm had vanished. Then he turned to the survivors. "You see now," he said. "We did not come here to fail," the crowd whispered. Word spread like fire. "The humans, they are different. They came when no one else did. They stood when we thought no one could." Keylor stepped forward, his heart racing. "What you built here, it is impossible. And yet, it stands. What else can you do?" Elias looked at him, and in his eyes burned a promise. "Whatever it takes." The survivors stared at the man, and a new fear stirred within them. Not fear of the storm, not fear of death, but fear of what humanity might truly be. For the galaxy had always believed humans were weak, fragile, unimportant. But here, on a dying world, they had done the impossible. And the stars would never forget. Yet when the storm roared, the night after the great storm was uneasy. The Vayari survivors gathered inside the human dome, staring at the glowing walls like they were staring at a miracle. Outside, their own shelters lay in ruins. Nothing had survived except what the humans had built, but even as the people whispered in awe, fear still lingered. They could not believe that something so small, built by a species they had long dismissed, had stood against a storm that had destroyed entire cities. Keylor sat near the edge of the dome, his fingers brushing the smooth surface. It pulsed faintly with energy like it was alive. "How?" he whispered. "What power is this?" Behind him, Commander Elias Ward moved silently among his crew. They checked the generators, repaired small fractures in the shield, and prepared supplies for the next day. To the humans, it was simply work. To the Vayari, it was something close to magic. By dawn, the storm was gone. The desert outside lay silent, but it was a silence of death. Towers that had once stretched toward the sky were now nothing but piles of rubble. Great statues of the old Vayari kings had fallen, faces buried in the dust. The land looked like it had been swallowed by fire. The survivors walked out cautiously, their feet crunching over broken stone. Many wept at the sight of their ruined city. Others stared back at the glowing dome, still intact, untouched by the fury of the storm. "The humans," one elder muttered. "They built a shelter stronger than anything we had in centuries." "But for how long?" another asked. "They cannot stand against everything." As if the words had summoned danger, a new sound broke the air. Engines. From the east, dark shapes appeared in the sky. At first, the survivors thought it was more rescue. Hope rose for a heartbeat. But then the markings on the ships came into view: red banners, spiked armor, and the symbol of the Marauder clan's raiders. Panic spread. The survivors stumbled back toward the dome. Children screamed. Warriors reached for broken weapons, their faces pale. Keylor's voice cracked. "We have nothing left. They will enslave us all." The ships descended like vultures, landing on the shattered plains. From them poured raiders in jagged armor, carrying whips, chains, and plasma rifles. Their leader, a massive brute with scarred skin, raised his weapon high. "This world is ours," he roared. "Your council abandoned you. Your homes are dust. You belong to us now." The Vayari fell silent, their last hope crumbling. What good was one human ship against a horde of raiders? But Commander Elias Ward stepped forward. His crew stood behind him, calm and unshaken. Their rifles hummed with energy. Drones lifted from the Resolute, their red eyes glowing. Elias's voice cut through the fear. "No. This world called for help, and we answered. If you want it, you'll have to go through us." The raider leader laughed, a cruel sound. "One ship? A handful of weaklings? You think you can stand against us?" Elias did not smile. His voice was quiet but sharp. "Try us." The first shots rang out. The raiders charged, their rifles blazing. But the human drones moved like shadows, darting between blasts, returning fire with deadly precision. Explosions tore across the field. The crew of the Resolute fought with discipline the Vayari had never seen. Every step was measured, every shot precise. Where the raiders screamed with chaos, the humans fought with control. Kelor watched in shock. He had believed the humans fragile, weak compared to the other species. But now, as he saw them stand against impossible numbers, something inside him shifted. "This is not weakness," he whispered. "This is something else." The battle raged across the ruins. The Vayari hid behind the dome, eyes wide as humans pushed forward. One soldier fell, another took their place. The drones circled like predators, cutting down raiders one by one. Finally, Elias himself stepped into the open. The raider leader roared and charged, swinging a blade of plasma fire. The human commander did not back away. He met the strike with his own rifle, sparks flying, then drove the butt of the weapon into the raider's chest. The brute staggered. Elias's voice was low, deadly. "This world asked for help. You'll find none here." He fired. The raider leader fell. The survivors gasped. The rest of the raiders, seeing their commander dead, broke and fled toward their ships. Engines roared as they lifted off, vanishing into the sky. Silence fell over the battlefield. The Vayari stepped out slowly, their eyes wide, their voices trembling. They had expected death. Instead, they saw victory. Not from empires, not from fleets, but from humans. One child whispered the words that none could ignore. "The humans saved us." Kelor looked at Elias, standing tall in the ashes, rifle in hand, his armor scorched, but his eyes burning with steady fire. In that moment, Kelor understood the truth. When the storm roared, when death came, when all hope was gone, humanity did not run. Humanity stood, and the galaxy would regret underestimating them. Fire against the darkness. The battlefield was silent after the raiders fled. Smoke curled from the broken ground. Weapons lay scattered in the dust. The Vayari survivors stepped out, slowly, their eyes wide, their voices hushed. They had seen many battles before, but never one like this. The humans had not come with fleets, nor with grand speeches. They had come with discipline, courage, and fire, and they had driven the raiders away. Children pointed at the drones still circling above. "They fly like hunters," one whispered. An elder shook his head. "No, they fight like predators, Commander." Elias Ward stood in the center of the ruins, his armor blackened, his rifle heavy in his hands. He watched the sky where the raider ships had vanished, his jaw tight. He knew they would return. Raiders always returned. But when he turned, he saw the survivors staring at him, not with doubt, not with fear, but with awe. Kelor stepped forward. His voice trembled as he spoke. "You stood when no one else would. You fought when even we had given up. Why? Why risk your lives for us?" Elias looked at him, his eyes steady. "Because the galaxy has forgotten you. We haven't." The words spread like fire through the survivors. Some wept openly. Others clenched their fists as if a new strength had entered their bones. But peace did not last. By nightfall, new signals flashed across the horizon. Human scanners lit up with red warnings. Dozens of ships, bigger than before, were moving toward Trelvac. The raiders had returned, with reinforcements. Fear swept through the survivors. They crowded inside the dome, whispering prayers, clutching their children. "It is over," an elder muttered. "No one can stand against such numbers." But Elias did not waver. He stood on the dome's ramp, watching the scanners. His crew looked to him, waiting. "What are your orders, Commander?" one asked. Elias's voice was calm, but it carried like thunder. "We do not run. We do not surrender. Tonight, we fight." The humans prepared quickly. Drones were recharged. Railguns were mounted on the dome's walls. Mines were buried in the broken ground. Every piece of technology they carried was pushed to its limit. The Vayari watched, confused. "Your weapons are few," one said. "You cannot win." Elias turned, his face hard. We do not need more weapons. We only need enough to break their courage. As darkness fell, the sky lit with fire. Raider ships descended like a storm of steel, their engines screaming, their weapons glowing red. From the shadows of their ships, hundreds of raiders poured onto the plains, roaring with fury. The Vayari trembled. But the humans stood tall. Drones, launch! Elias commanded. The night exploded with light. Human drones shot upward, weaving through the air, firing bolts of plasma. Mines ignited across the field, tearing apart the first wave of raiders. The railguns roared, each shot striking with the force of thunder. The survivors gasped as they watched. The battle was chaos, but the humans moved with deadly precision. They fought not with size or strength, but with cleverness. Every trap sprung at the right moment. Every shot fired where it would break the enemy most. The raiders pushed forward, their numbers overwhelming, their screams echoing across the plains. But each time they struck, they were met with fire. Kalor stood at the edge of the dome, his heart pounding. They fight like no one else. They fight as if every breath matters. The Vayari warriors, ashamed of their own despair, picked up broken weapons and joined the defense. Side by side with the humans, they fired into the darkness. Hope lit their hearts again. Hours passed. The battlefield burned with fire and smoke, but slowly, surely the raiders began to break. Their leader fell, their lines collapsed, and their ships retreated into the night, leaving only wreckage behind. When the final shot echoed into silence, the survivors realized the truth. They were still alive. The humans had not only saved them, once they had saved them twice. Elias lowered his rifle, his face pale with exhaustion but his eyes fierce. He turned to the Vayari, his voice carrying across the battlefield. Remember this night. When the galaxy turned its back, you were not alone. Humanity stood with you. Humanity always stands. The survivors erupted with cries of joy, their voices shaking the ruined sky. They had seen the impossible with their own eyes. Not fleets, not empires, but a single human ship had turned back an army. Kelor's hand shook as he whispered, "They are not saviors of stone or fire. They are saviors of will, and no darkness can break them." And though the battlefield was littered with smoke and blood, the survivors knew one truth that would spread far beyond Trelvak. When all else fails, humanity answers with fire. The choice of the star's word of the battle spread faster than the wind. Within days, signals echoed across the nearby systems. Whispers grew into rumors, and rumors into fear. The galaxy had expected Trelvak to die quietly, forgotten in the dust. Instead, raiders had been defeated by humans, not fleets, not empires, not the mighty council. One ship, one crew. The name humanity carried a new weight. On Trelvak, the survivors worked beside their strange saviors. The dome grew larger, reinforced with human alloy. Wells were dug. Food supplies were rationed and shared. Where despair had ruled, for years, hope began to take root. But not everyone was grateful. A group of alien envoys arrived, representatives of nearby worlds tied to the Galactic Council. They came in shining ships, their banners polished, their words honeyed with politics. They stood in the ruins, cloaks flowing, and addressed the survivors. "This protection is dangerous," one envoy declared. "You place yourselves in the hands of a primitive race. Humans are reckless. They bring chaos wherever they go," the Vayari murmured. Some nodded in fear. The galaxy had always spoken of humans as dangerous, unpredictable, even violent. Was it wise to trust them? But then Kalor stepped forward. His voice was strong for the first time in years. "When the storms crushed us, where was the council? When the raiders chained us, where were you? Only the humans stood here." "Only," they answered. The envoy sneered. "They will abandon you too." Commander Elias Ward walked through the crowd, his armor still scarred from the battle. His voice was calm but carried like thunder. "We do not abandon those who call for help. That is the difference between us and your council. The survivors erupted with cheers. The envoys grew pale, their power slipping from them like sand through fingers. Later that night, the survivors gathered in the ruins of the old capital. Fires burned, casting long shadows across the broken stones. At the center, Elias stood with his crew. Around him, the Veari whispered their fears, their hopes, their questions. "What happens now?" one asked. "The raiders will return," another muttered. Stronger, angrier. Elias did not deny it. His voice was steady. "They will come again, but you are not alone anymore. Humanity has heard your cry, and we are not the only ship. We are only the first." Gasps spread. Could it be true? More humans would come? Keylor's heart pounded. He looked at Elias, then at his people. The choice was clear, though it burned, with risk. Stay loyal to the council who had abandoned them, or stand with humanity who had bled for them. The elders debated until dawn. Some clung to fear. Some whispered of betrayal. But when the first sun rose over the broken towers, the survivors made their choice. Before the crowd, Keylor spoke the words that changed their fate. "We stand with humanity." The Veari cheered. Some wept. The envoys from the council turned, away in anger, their banners falling into dust. But it was not only Trelvak that stirred. Across nearby systems, other dying colonies began to send new signals. Distress calls not to the council but directly to Earth. And for the first time in galactic history, the message carried a spark of certainty. They knew who would answer. Still, Elias Ward's face remained grim. He watched the horizon where the stars burned like watchful eyes. He knew what would come next. The galaxy would not accept humanity's rise quietly. Empires would grow uneasy. The council would grow hostile. Raiders would grow bolder. But none of that mattered. He looked at his crew, tired but unbroken. He looked at the survivors, alive with hope. He looked at the glowing dome, still standing against the endless storms, and he whispered, "One cry has been answered. But there will be more." Keylor heard him. "And when they call?" Elias's eyes burned with steady fire. "We answer, always." That night, as the survivors slept, the humans stood watch beneath the stars. The storms had quieted, but a greater storm was rising, one that would shake the galaxy itself. For the first time, the stars faced a question they could not ignore. Would they stand with the council's silence, or would they stand with humanity's fire? The choice belonged not just to Trelvak, but to the galaxy itself. And the galaxy was watching humanity's answer. The stars over Trelvak burned cold and silent. For weeks after the battle, the survivors rebuilt under the protection of the humans. The dome grew larger, stronger, fed by machines the Veari had never seen. Wells brought clean water. Crops began to sprout in soil long thought dead. Children laughed again for the first time in years. But the galaxy was restless. From the outer colonies came whispers of rebellion. From the council came silence heavy with anger. And from the dark corners of space came new threats. The promise that raiders, mercenaries, even empires would test this new power. The name of humanity was spreading like wildfire. One night, in the shadow of the broken Capitol Tower, Commander Elias Ward stood with Keylor, looking at the stars. The Veari engineer's voice trembled with both awe and fear. "You know this cannot remain hidden," Keylor said. "The galaxy will hear of what you did here. They will not ignore it." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Good. Let them hear." The next day it happened. The skies lit with fire as a council fleet descended, sleek warships, banners glowing, weapons charged. They had not come to rescue. They had come to warn. A voice echoed from the flagship, cold and sharp. "Veari survivors, you will surrender to the council's authority. Reject the humans. Hand them over, or suffer destruction." Fear swept the survivors. They crowded inside the dome, whispering. Could the humans fight the council itself? No raider horde compared to this. These were the empires, the rulers of the galaxy. Keller turned to Elias, his voice breaking. "What will you do? You cannot fight them all." The human commander stepped forward, his voice calm, steady, and sharp as steel. "We will not fight them all. But we will answer." He opened a channel. The human ship's signal cut through the Council's broadcast. Every survivor heard his words. Every Council ship did too. "You call yourselves rulers of the stars," Elias said. "You call yourselves protectors. But when Trelvac cried out, you turned away. When they begged for mercy, you gave them silence. When death came, you let it fall." The Council ships remained silent. The survivors held their breath. Elias's voice grew stronger. "We are not rulers. We are not emperors. We are not saviors. We are human, and when the galaxy cries, we listen. When the weak call, we answer. When darkness rises, we burn it away." His words carried like thunder. The survivors erupted with cheers, their voices drowning out fear. The Council fleet, shamed and shaken, did not fire. Perhaps they feared humanity's strange courage. Perhaps they feared the story that was already spreading faster than war itself. Slowly, their ships turned and withdrew, vanishing back into the cold night. When the last engine's glow faded, silence filled the air. Then the survivors shouted as one, their voices echoing across the ruins. "Humanity answered." Keeler fell to his knees, tears burning his eyes. Never had he imagined this day, that a fragile, ignored species would become their shield, their fire, their hope. The galaxy would remember this, not because of fleets or armies, not because of crowns or councils, but because when no one else dared, humanity had stood up. That night, as fires burned for celebration, Elias Ward spoke once more to his crew and to the survivors gathered around. His voice was not loud, but it carried into every heart. "Do not mistake this. We are not finished. More cries will come from more worlds. The Council will not forgive. The Raiders will not forget. The storms will never rest. But neither will we. This is humanity's answer. When the galaxy cries, we rise." Children repeated the words. Elders whispered them like prayers. Warriors swore them as oaths. And across the stars, as other colonies heard the tale, they too began to send their signals. Not to the Council, not to the empires, but to Earth. And one truth spread across the galaxy like fire in the night. When all others turned away, when even the stars gave silence, only humanity answered.